Now, a lot of people do not understand why Trump is going after Taiwan, because Taiwan is a very close ally of the United States, and setting 25% tariffs on one of their lead industries is very similar to declaring economic war. You're basically strong arming them to do what's not in their interest in order to appease the United States. And my view on this is that if you're trying to understand modern geopolitics the same way we did up until now, and you're trying to look at it that America has allies, and no, that's not the way you're supposed to look at it. If you want it to make sense, if you want this decision to resonate in your head and understand why it's happening, the way you need to look at geopolitics from now on, I mean, this is the reality on the ground, whether people want to accept it or not, is that the United States doesn't really have allies. It has vassals. Like, if you're looking at this from a medieval standpoint, where you have like the massive empire and it's got like vassals all around, kind of like the British Empire, right? And it's got vassals, then everything makes sense. Because what's happening, especially if you followed the news recently, China is trying to become the world hegemon. Like, they're competing with the United States. And so when issued the challenge, historically speaking, the world hegemon, the empire in question, is going to try to defend itself. Like, it's going to try to compete. And in order for the United States to compete, it's going to try to squeeze everything it can out of its vassals. This is why it's bullying Canada. This is the whole thing with Greenland. This is what's going on with Taiwan. Basically, America wants every single edge and advantage in order to fight off China becoming the world hegemon. And so this is going to have significant geopolitical ramifications in the change of behavior in the United States. I don't think this is just a Trump thing. It's going to be interesting to see when he finishes his term if this type of diplomacy will continue. But what's sure right now that for the next 4 years, this is how people need to view politics. Now, you need to understand that squeezing your vassals, historically speaking, like, again, I'm not using it as a pejorative. I'm not trying to cast moral judgment on the issue. I'm just using historical comparisons that, in my mind, make sense. And so, if you're squeezing the vassals, then there's three possibilities. Number one, the vassal actually does what you want, right? So, like, when Denmark says, oh, we actually did send troops back in the day and we helped you guys with Iraq and whatnot, it's like, well, it's your duty as a vassal to do that. Like, the only thing that you're getting for doing that is not getting beaten up. And this is actually true, right? Like, we noticed what happened with Germany that stepped out of line and had the gas pipe from Russia into its nation. Like, that gas pipe blew up. Whether the Americans did it or not, the Americans don't seem very upset, right? Like, they're not set on investigating and punishing who did this to an ally, which is what an ally would behave if you're actually an ally. If it's a vassal, which is stepping out of line and bad things happen to it, it's like, c'est la vie, right? And even the Biden administration said, it's like, well, that pipeline isn't going to stand there for long. So if you're looking at the modern geopolitics through the lens that I gave you, then everything makes sense. If you're the vassal and you're sending troops to help the empire, then your reward is that you don't get punished. But you're expected to actually do that, right? And so there is another opportunity that the vassal can take, which is to rebel. The vassal can at any point reorient its alliances, right? It's a little bit difficult because you gotta fight against the empire's soft power. Like, the empire projects soft power through the culture, through the stuff that's offering. So, like, back in the day, America, through Hollywood, through TV shows, cartoons, and movies, managed to capture the world. A lot of people from Eastern Europe absolutely loved American music, rock and roll. Like, they were viewed as the peak of cultural civilization. And so we wanted to emulate them. And if you had a politician that said, oh, we need to ally with Russia, like, that politician would immediately end his career. Because people would be like, what are you doing? Are you saying, like, no, we like America. And so, if a vassal wants to rebel, like, first of all, it needs to wonder what the people think. And if the people view the United States as an empire of good and decency, then they're not going to do that. The second thing is to accept the consequences. Just simply turning your back to the United States and choosing to find different allies well, that's going to be complicated, and at the same time, it's going to come with punishments. Like, imagine if, I don't know, Hungary would basically say, yeah, from this day forward, we're going to start trading with Russia. We actually decided to become closer with them, blah, blah, blah. Like, immediately they would get economic sanctions. They would get the United States pressuring the EU to punish them, right? So, like, it's not impossible, but again, there are consequences. And so, like, when you look at the situation with Colombia, for instance, the United States is their biggest trade partner. But when the Colombian president decided to become a cheeky little shit, the United States immediately put them in their place and said, we don't need your coffee, we will fuck you up if you keep doing this. And so, the president now has an opportunity. Number one, keeps working with the Americans. Number two, they can reorient themselves towards other neighbor states and China. Right? And this is where China comes in, that's now competing with the United States. And they're going to be the ones, and this is my prediction, they're going to be the ones that are going to LARP as being the friendly empire, as being the friendly alternative. Like, if you deal with the United States, look, they're unhinged, they're unpredictable. Even their close allies all of a sudden can get tariffs overnight. Meanwhile, our trade partners, I mean, don't look at what's happening in Africa, but like, our trade partners are being treated fairly. We don't tariff them, we don't do anything like of the sort. So why don't you start trading with us? Why don't you reorient yourself towards us? And I think, like, this is going to be the soft power that's being projected over the next couple of decades right now. It's going to be like China trying to compete with the United States the same way that the US used Hollywood, TV shows, and music. China is going to use video games, its own music, its own aesthetics, its own social media apps, in order to try to get the young generation to stop thinking that America is the peak of human civilization, and they'll be like, no, there's actually alternatives. If you don't like the United States, maybe you like us, right? And the idea is to plant the seeds into the mind of the people so that when a politician comes up and they're like, well, you know, like, the United States is behaving erratic recently. Like, why did they put 25% tariffs on Taiwan? Taiwan is their ally. Like, we don't want to end up in a similar situation. Let's see if we can couple to China a little bit more. This is what China wants to happen, right? Like, this is what their main goal and strategy will be, and it will probably work if the United States keeps treating its allies like this. You get a little bit of political leeway, you know, especially now in the beginning because he just took office and it's his administration. But if he keeps muscling all of the vassals like this, you know, you go to Canada, you give them shit. You go to Denmark and you give them shit. And then you give Taiwan shit. And it's like, well, hold on a little bit. Right? Like, it's one thing when you go after Colombia and you have a moral reason to do so and people understand. But you still want the image, you still want the view of the world to believe that these are your allies, right? Like, they're not your vassals. But if you keep going and you strong arm each and every one of them, like, you keep making these massive waves, this massive change in a very short amount of time, because that's also important. Yeah, I mean, the people of the world are going to look at the United States and they're going to be afraid of you. And this is not the way that the United States has made politics in recent years, right? Like, they didn't govern by fear. They're not like Russia. And Russia was like, especially the Soviet Union, it's like, if you step out of line, if you vote incorrectly, then the Red Army will pay a visit. That's one way of running an empire. The European Union is running it differently. The European Union is having a lot of laws and regulations and bureaucracy. And so almost everyone kind of breaks some laws here and there, and if you do what the European Union wants you to do, then you get leeway, they don't notice it, but the moment you step out of line, sanctions, you get punishment, and you have to pay fines, and, you know, that's how the European Union governs. The United States, they govern very differently, like, they govern as a benevolent force, especially towards their allies, right? Because, like, when you look at the Middle East, well, it's not so comfy. But, like, outside of that, they're like, well, we just want freedom, liberty, and justice for all, so we're going to let you do what you want, blah, blah, blah. This is a huge change in leadership. And so, like, the thing with Taiwan is that it's in a position where, like, yeah, Trump can absolutely muscle them in. They made some bad decisions in the past, and so now Trump can just come in and collect. On the short term, like, yeah, he's going to get a lot of advantage out of it. On the long run, however, well, it's going to be very difficult and uncertain. I think Taiwan can come up on top, but then again, like Trump can squeeze them even further. So, for those of you who don't know the history of Taiwan, they're like the legit government of China that during the Communist Revolution, they fled to a different island, right? They fled to Taiwan. China was unable to go after the government in exile, if you will, so now they formed another nation. A lot of people say like that is the actual rightful rulers of China because they're the descendant of that government, while the Communist Party is the illegitimate government, and the Taiwan is like the descendant of the official one. Basically, like the Chinese are upset that they haven't finished their Red Revolution, right? Like they view Taiwan as being part of them. It's like that one piece that they couldn't get when they started their Communist revolutions because the Americans intervened. And so Taiwan has been defended by the United States and is existing because of the United States. And it also became like one of the biggest commercial hubs in the area. Like it's very important for the logistical shipments of a lot of nations on Earth. And on top of that, it's also the major manufacturer of chips. Right? And chips go into everything nowadays. They go into your phone, they go into your TV, they're going into your car, into your computer. It's kind of like in World War II if Poland was the only nation that could manufacture steam engines, to get a comparison. So they play like an important strategic role. Now for Taiwan, the ability to produce 90% of the chip manufacturing on Earth is also what keeps them safe, right? Like it's also the guarantee that if anything happens, the United States has to step in. And also, like, China is not going to do anything because they also understand the geopolitical strategy that Taiwan has with the rest of the world. Like, if China was to actually invade Taiwan, the economic catastrophe that the planet Earth would suffer would be tremendous. And so they would piss off almost everyone. They would end up with almost no allies or goodwill overnight. And so that's why they don't fuck around. However, Trump's plan to get the chips into the United States, and I think like China is developing their own chip manufacturing, is basically like trying to decouple from Taiwan. So they're trying to take away that Taiwanese leverage. And if you're in the shoes of the government of Taiwan, they're in a very difficult situation right now. Because on one hand, if they play ball, they lose like their advantage. Their one, it's not just financial, but it's like their guarantee of safety. And if they if they don't play ball, then well, at any point the United States can harsher relationships, and they may start pulling away military aid. They might start doing other things that may not be tariffs, but they may be military in nature, which would cause a lot of panic in Taiwan and actually get them to obey whatever the U.S. wants, because again, they are a vassal. Like they can't exist without the United States. But the United States are LARPing that they're allies. They're not vassals. Well, you gotta pick and choose, right? It's bad for PR, basically. Like, if the United States wants to create its image that all these nations are allies, it does so because it serves a purpose, right? Like, the leaders of the United States at the time decided that this is the best way forward. Like, this is actually a better way to govern than to govern with fear, like Russia does. But you gotta maintain the image. You gotta maintain the appearance. Like, you can't just go to your close allies. Like, Taiwan did nothing to upset the United States, right? Like, they've been playing ball consistently. And so, like, Saudi Arabia, for instance, may start wondering, it's like, hold on a little bit. Like, if they treat Taiwan like that, why would they treat us differently? Like, what if overnight the president starts thinking about tariffing us or doing bad stuff to us? Like, maybe we should strengthen our relationship with China. Maybe we shouldn't do what Trump says by cheapening the oil in order to hurt the Russians, because the Russians may actually be an alternative, right? Like a lot of nations, and this is how Romania survived when it was a vassal. You want to play the empires against each other. Like, you're not using morality or anything. You're using geopolitical strategy. And it's like, who's the competitor for the United States? Well, it's China and Russia. It's like, okay, well, maybe I don't want to hurt Russia. Russia's already down now. Like, why would I hurt it? Let's make the U.S. hurt itself, right? And it's also the unfair way they're treating Taiwan, because with Colombia, it was very fair. Like, Colombia already had international obligations of taking in its own citizens. It was given an ultimatum. It's like, we're not going to tariff you if you just play ball. Just take the citizens. With Taiwan, from what I see, there is no alternative. Like, they're going to get tariffs. Their economy is going to suffer. And it's kind of sad because a lot of people in Taiwan were cheering when Donald Trump got elected. And it basically shows to America allies, like, they may not give you a way out. Like, if you're competing with them and you're making more chips than they're doing, like, they can just fuck with you. And so this is a change in politics, as I mentioned before. Now, what Taiwan is going to do about it, it's going to be interesting. I think they can actually push through. We're talking about computer chips. Everyone needs computer chips, right? Like, you need them for your phone, you need them for your computer, you need them for your car. And so people will probably be willing to pay 25% more. However, the plan here, I think that the chips that will be manufactured in the United States, they may even get tax cuts. So if it ends up that a microprocessor that's made in the US costs $50 and a processor that's made in Taiwan costs $250, just because it's made in Taiwan and the processing power is similar, the specs are similar, yeah, you can see how Taiwan is just going to be unable to sell its product in the United States. Like, unless they're willing to take a huge loss, it's impossible. And so, like, all the leftists that are saying it's like, well, tariffs just forwards the price to the consumer, they keep forgetting that at any point the government can stop taxing something. So, like, if you want, let's say, tariff cars that are coming from abroad, but at the same time you remove all taxes and regulations from the cars in your country, well, all of a sudden for the consumer the choice becomes obvious. Like, it's not even like comparing the specs or anything like that. Is basically, you know, like, well, I'm going to get this car because it's a lot cheaper, and it can be like 50% cheaper. Anyway, right, if you use the lens that I gave you, a lot of these political moves are going to make a lot more sense. It's too early to predict if they're going to be effective. Obviously, like, not all of them are going to be effective. Some are going to backfire. Other ones may actually work out. With Colombia, definitely worked out. This one with Taiwan, it's a little bit more iffy. It's a little bit more iffy. And I'm pretty sure they also have, like, measures for the European Union if they try to censor social media. Because the United States is also right now competing on soft power with China. Right? It doesn't really bode well when China manages to convince the American youth to sign on Red Note and get indoctrinated with Chinese messaging. And I know that Red Note is not representative for the people of China, but, like, the Americans don't know that. They go there and they actually get invested into it. The same way with the Chinese AI. Like, if people use it and they like it more than ChatGPT in its responses, in the way it gives the prompts, then that's another Chinese soft power. And so America, I think, is taking it seriously. This is why Trump has also sent, I think, like, representatives in Hollywood to try to unfuck their movie industry. They're interested in projecting soft power and to showing the world that, no, America is actually as great as it always was. We'll see if they're successful. It's interesting. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys on my live stream. Take care.